Hello everybody, Thy Lord Root here, and welcome to a very special episode of Let's Play KSP. Today happens to be the day that 1.0 dropped, and so there's a lot of features that everybody's been looking forward to. I know I have, at least. One of the features that I think just about everybody's noticed is that the loading times are a lot quicker here. And that's a very good thing for us, because, the game used to take forever to load, especially with mods. Now, speaking of which, I have no idea whether or not mods are broken in this case or not. But let's not worry about mods for now, let's worry about vanilla. And you can see our three guys here, but we have a new player on the scene. We have Valentina, the first female Kerbal. And this does sort of prove that Kerbals actually are gendered, but it's still out whether or not perhaps they reproduce through parthenogenesis as well. I'm going to leave you to speculate on that, but we're going to hop straight into sandbox mode here. We'll go ahead, let's take a look at our difficulty settings here. You'll notice we have a number of new things here. So, of course, we have the usual stuff, like, all of our sliders and stuff, but we also have resource heating, re-entry heating, and resource abundance, which we will leave behind for now. We'll just call this Demo Sandbox 1.0, and we'll get moving. Now, I think it's worth starting out at the spaceplane hangar, because there's a lot of new things with the spaceplane hangar here. Certainly things that we're not used to. So we'll just cancel out of this. Let's build ourselves a plane. You might say, why are we using this Mark 1 inline cockpit? Because that doesn't have an IVA. Turns out it does, and that's really nice as well that it does. But there are other things as well. For instance, we of course have this adapter. We've seen it, but now if we look under control, we have the fly-by-wire avionics hub. This guy has been moved around a couple of times. It was formerly a control part. Now it is a, then it became like a science part, right? And I guess the squad developers decided that didn't make too much sense. So, that changed. But then it came back to be basically the still to where it's not a flight computer, but it'll give your pilots that are untrained SAS, which is pretty good stuff. And so the part we have to replace the thing that it formerly was is this atmospheric fluid spectrovariometer. These are actually real devices. I believe they're used to measure, like, air currents and fluid currents as well if you have a ship. So let's not really waste too much time on that. Let's instead begin to build a plane. Now, of course, if we decide to build a plane, then we should probably take advantage of the new features. And there are tons of them. So, for instance, we might want better wings, right? Bigger wings. And we have them. These are for the Mark III. But they will just as easily do for the other guys as well. You can see they have a little bit of a pitch to them, so that they can fly. Of course, you may decide those are too big, and I probably would not blame you for that. But other things that we have as well is if we go under aerodynamics, we have engine nacelles. And I think on their own, they do take a little bit of intake air, but we're not going to bother with that. Instead, we're going to try out some of the new intakes here. So this guy, let's see if I can find him. This guy is pretty cool here. This ram air intake. This replaces the old black intake that they formerly had here. And then, in addition to that, we also have many jet engines as well. I'm going to put 6 of them on here. Thrust is probably going to be a little bit asymmetric. So what we could do about that is we could raise the wingtips just a little bit. And then make this like a B-52. So we can maybe get this thrust on out here. Let's just rotate the wings very slightly. We'll do a, we'll make this thing come down like this. It doesn't really do much for stability, but it does raise the center of mass, and now we're kind of stuck with what to do here. If we can just move this guy up a little bit, we'll be fine, I think. Now, of course, we know about, you know, some of these plane pieces, but there's new ones. There are these big S elevons. And the big S elevons are your new parts for your planes. I might have done this just a little bit wrong. They are for the big fuel tanks, so to speak. We have lots of elevons to choose from, including these guys here. So we can get something that looks more like a plane. Let's deploy this to see if it's going the right direction. And indeed it is not. We want it to be going the other way. I think if we deploy this now... Oh, it was deployed inverted. That explains a lot, actually. We'll just turn these guys around again and deploy them. There we go. So, you know, we generate this thing with tons of lift. And possibly rotate these guys on over, like so. And get ourselves a fairly nice deal going on here. And there we go. Just a shade more way of way of our fins here, and we can, you know, get this guy up and going. I like to sort of use this blended approach here, where we do this sort of thing. And then of course there's a question of our engines. We will get those on with engine nacelles. And I think that'll be okay the way we are doing it. Let's just see our mass here. Unused liquid fuel. But we'll take all the liquid fuel out of here. This is just going to be structural. We're just going to depend on the fuel in the wings. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple. The real planes actually do have fuel in the wings, as it turns out. So let's just take care of this real quick. We need jet engines to stick on the back here, and then I think we said we were going to stick this guy up here so that the thrust would okay, I think that's a little bit too much. We want a very slight dihedral angle. Only slight, though. Better find our center of mass as well. We're still behind our center of mass, and remember, it is actually pretty important to get that set up correctly. Your center left. Ooh, okay, we need to be on local mode. I can't remember which one that is. Rotation local. Rotation absolute. We'll just do like that. Maybe, well, you know, that's okay. We'll do that. We just need to slap a tail fin on this thing. And there's some options for that. We could use something kind of like the orbiter's fins, which we may not find all that useful. Or we could maybe use one of these guys here. There happens to be this fat aeroplane wing. We can just set to y'all. Now, me not being the airplane expert, I don't know too much about this. But I will tell you one thing. There is something we should add. These are air brakes. And air brakes basically do what they say on the tin. They are very useful for a great many things. Now, of course, there's this question of how are we going to even get off the ground. And it turns out we've got these nice little landing gear here. I'm going to get rid of I'm going to change the camber just a little bit. Because, for a couple of reasons. First, we don't want this. I think these guys are pointing out they're actually pretty good, I think. I thought they had a little bit of toe, but they don't. We'll put this guy on here as well. And we can afford to raise our gear just a little bit, because we do have a bit of a tilt here. Finally, something you may have missed. There are actually drogue chutes as well. So I haven't tried this. We may just sort of flip off the pad. I'm hoping not. We'll call this the Crashy Jet Mark 1. And we will throw kick Jebediah out and throw Valentina in. And maybe see how this thing works. Now, there are many people on YouTube that do space planes, and if you're interested in that, you should certainly check them out, but right now I'm just going to go to full throttle. I think we're good to go. Ooh, this could be bad. We've got... Oh, we took off almost immediately. So here's the deal with drag. With drag, we can come here to our physics. We can say display aero forces and fly, and as you can see, we have some drag on the top of the wings because our bay is a little bit exposed. We have lots of lift as well, and you'll notice we have actually gotten quite far here. We're already above Mach 1. Oh, interesting thing too. Okay, I'm not going to be able to fly with that. I'm going to turn it off. It is... We have an IVA view now for this thing, which is really cool. I think I have way too much lift, so I'm going to try to turn about. You can see that my G-forces will probably go up as a result. In fact, maybe I could just turn around. I forget the name of this maneuver. But we'll just throttle the engine up. This has a specific name that, because I'm not a pilot, I'm not aware of. And this thing is humongously oversized. Well, let's take a look at our resources anyway. We have plenty of intake air. But, as it turns out, intake air is not all that useful anymore. Because air hogging is not really a possibility here. Turn on the air brakes to flip us over just a little bit. We do have to be careful because now we can rip our craft apart. That was something that we formerly could not do. And I'll just turn around like so. Let's see, what is an active here? Roll is active. These guys are pitched in the wrong direction. I'm just going to turn this thing into a glider for the time being, because we're going entirely too fast. This is part of the problem in my design. Having the wings up top here means that this plane has a tendency to pitch up. I'm gonna set the trim just a little bit. And we'll go through the physics time warp. So, oh, actually, we do want to pull around in that direction. Aha! It's more or less as I've feared. The controls are backwards on this thing, because I'm actually... We need a little bit of thrust vectoring. I'm getting all of the control I'm getting because these guys are inverted. Now I just need to pull up from this. I don't think I'll be able to make it in time. Well, that didn't take too long, did it? Let's just diagnose this, because I think I did invert my control surfaces. I'm not too sure about that. They are normally deployed. Let's say, though, that we do want to quickly abort this thing. Maybe I've changed my mind about, you know, taking off. Well, I can do that. I can simply go like this. I'm going to begin lifting off pretty soon. And maybe Valentina's like, you know, this thing is not the easiest thing in the world to fly. So I can deploy these chutes here. And then my air brakes will help slow me down. And I go a little bit of a way. But, you know, that's one thing, definitely, that's worth checking out. And there we go. Well, I'm done with planes for now because I'm not very good at them. I think planes will be a little bit easier to fly, though. If we design them correctly. We're more interested in rockets. And there is a real concern. It seems like, you know, I've been playing this for a little, like maybe 30 minutes. I was going to record a video, and I just, you know, one of the things you have to worry about is overheating. And for some reason or another, I just could not get Jeb to blow up. So I'm not going to waste my time with that. I guess they tweaked the aerodynamics just a little bit. We're going to blow Jeb up in a different way. Because, really one of the issues here, of course, is, as we well know, we'll just put on some fins for stability here, but as we well know, you don't turn into space by, you don't turn into space by, or get into orbit by going straight up, right? We're going to do that anyhow, because I think it may be a good way to get Jub to burn up the atmosphere, and I am very interested in that prospect. Because, why not? We'll just get him on one of these SRBs, which, by the way, there is a new SRB. It's called the Flea. But, yeah, let's get this guy brought down a little bit. One more decoupler, I think, should do it. And let's say that we're worried about Jub's safety. I mean, I'm not. And I don't think you should be, but it'll say, okay, decouplers are attached the wrong way. Probably because we started with our SRB first. Let's make that the root part. Then it'll say, you know, the engines are empty, and you know, this guy's gone the wrong way around. Empty control cabin, because we haven't put anybody in there. We'll throw Jeb in there. And that should get rid of the control issues, but now it says we got a parachute missing as well. Which is a big thing to worry about. Unused monopropellant. So, you know, there are things that this guy will be worried about, this engineer. And he will do his best to inform you what is wrong with that. I'm just going to send a Jub straight up. There really is no point in not doing so. This is normally a bad idea. But we'll turn on SAS. You can see we've got camera shaking. And we are going up quite rapidly. Now, with the new aerodynamic model, it actually takes about 1,000 or so less seconds, meters per second at delta V, to get around. And you get up to speed much faster. Your terminal velocity is no longer this single point that you have to worry about. And you can see we're overheating a little bit. Not nearly as much as we could. But I just want to get him out of the atmosphere. So he gets a very shallow re-entry. And there we go. I think that's good for a shallow re-entry. You know what, we'll leave the parachutes on. It's not like they're going to do much of a job of slowing us down anyhow. Now, we could wait for this, but I'm not going to. Because what we can do here, is we can now come out here and we can say, if we click on this, warp here, and it'll automatically manage time warp for us. Now, of course, there are reasons to do it manually, as we were about to here. But, you know, we'll, oh! Okay, a little bit too much time warp. Because we crashed into the surface. Let's try that again. It didn't take us too long to get up to speed. And you know what? Why not also do some physical time acceleration as well? So that we don't have to wait so long. Something is burning up here. Oh, let's not turn over. Let's come over like this. We'll go straight up. And I'm just going to throw this parachute onto another stage because it's not necessary. We'll get a little bit of a kick from that as well. Okay, let us not abuse time warp again. Let me just warp over here. This thing will go about as quickly as it can. As you can see, Jeb is going to have the time of his life. Except, of course, that he's not. He's going to come plummeting at the planet very, very quickly. And we got a couple problems to contend with here. We are used to the atmosphere slowing us down much, much higher up, and we're getting to the velocities that we would normally encounter when we reach the moon. You can see we're already beginning to oscillate here. And what happened there? Well, it turns out that Jeb blew up because he overheated. So that's something we're going to have to take care of. Let's just go back to the vehicle assembly building and try a proper launch this time. Because that's going to be part of the issue, is that, you know, Jeb is not going to be very easily able to get out of the atmosphere this way. Now, we can do some things, like, for instance, we got this heat shield we can throw on, and I believe that is maybe under aerodynamic here. We'll just throw that there, and we get a little bit of a fairing there. A small one, but one that will help us out. And, you know, we've got this guy right here. So, what we really want to do is we want to do two things. First of all, we want to make sure that Jeb is not over, well, that he's not over, overheated and stressed, I guess. And I'm just going to put, this guy on here. We'll also put on some little guys as well. Now, I suspect what might happen if we are not careful. Let's try that 10K launch. We'll call this the space start. And we'll get Jeb up and going. Now, poor Jeb, of course, he's going to run into a bit of an issue here. I don't know how much thrust-to-weight ratio we have here. Well, let's try, very briefly, our gravity, or so-called gravity turn, rather, at 10K, because this is something that we learned from the old aerodynamic system, and it had to do with the fact that the atmosphere is so soupy. Now, it helps if we have canards on here, or I guess control surfaces, in order to make this turn. We are going in the wrong direction. It can be helpful to turn SAS off as a result here. You know, we're going moderately fast. And one of the things you'll learn very quickly is that SAS in the new aerodynamic model anyway does not work terribly well. It might have something to do with these wings here. I sort of got in the habit of not putting them on. But we're at 10K. Let's just pitch on over. Well, one thing with these wings is that we really can't do that. That is just not going to happen. So I'm going to revert this to launch instead. And I'm going to try a new trick. First of all, I'm going to assume the sky is stable. I think our thrust-to-weight ratio is pretty good here. We'll want to control our heading manually here. And then it would be good if once we get to 60 or so, we begin pitching over immediately. Now in FAR, if you try to pull that little stunt that I just did, then you will end up more or less falling out of the atmosphere. And now I am not touching the controls. And we are just going to tip over just a little bit. Now we don't want this to happen too quickly. It seems like maybe it has already happened a little bit too quickly and I'm going to crash into the ground as a result. So, one more time. We'll use SAS to get ourselves up and going. And I'm going to turn around 90K or so. The launch stability enhancers are probably going to be very useful here, because minor oscillations... Okay, let's not go like that. Let's pull over. Let's try to keep this thing centered, if we can. And I'm not going to pitch over here too much. The one thing you'll notice is that I am wobbling around a lot. We'll just turn off SAS here. Part of the reason for that is because the aerodynamics is making me move towards my prograde marker. And it wants to go to the center specifically. And so one of the more counterintuitive things here is that you don't want to correct inclination too soon. We'll get this thing to pitch over, and I won't touch the controls anymore. Not until we end up leaving the thicker part of the atmosphere. So this is a real gravity turn here. This is essentially what happens whenever you're pitched at such an angle that gravity is pulling you down. You can see here our apoapsis is pretty high up. We could come over just a little bit. And now it would be good for us to maybe pull this guy up. We're out of the atmosphere now. Whoa. Yeah, let's not do that. We're at 250 kilometers. Plenty of delta V to get out, though. I'm gonna go rather at a suborbital. Well, you know what? I'll get into orbit. Why not? Let's just do that. Let's see how much delta V we are able to, or we need to spend. 800 something. Do I really want to do this? This is something that will definitely require retraining whenever you start learning how this thing works again, because it really is, you know, if we can get our apoapsis here just about centered, it really is a deal to contend with. Now, I think we can just maybe warp to next maneuver node, and it should give us about half of our time, or maybe about a minute to respond, so we can make our adjustments. Now, as we all know, you burn at half of the still here. So I believe this is 18 that we're going to be burning at. And hopefully a Jub can get out of this okay. That is something of a mystery to me. If, you know, we can get Jub here in a decent spot. We still have plenty of fuel to get down, though. So let's say that Oh, we'll just burn prograde just a little bit more. I'm not going to hit the KSC, I don't think. But let's say that, you know, I do want to come down. Well, what do I do here? What we can do is we can get this guy... We want to get it down to a much shallower periapsis than I've been doing. 12 is probably a little bit too steep of a descent. 21. Let's try 21. And we will click away here. I'm going to warp to the next maneuver. We'll have about a minute or so to respond. And then we will burn. There we go. About 20. Now there's a couple of things you could do. If you have fuel like I do, when you re-enter the atmosphere, it will be possible for you to, you know, it'll be possible for you to use that to slow down if you want. However, I'm not going to do that because I have a heat shield. So I'm going to say goodbye to this thing, and I'm going to point retrograde. And of course we have this guy here that seems to not want to do retrograde correctly. I guess because it's going surface retro. And you can see already I am beginning to move away from the retrograde marker. Now, of course, we are nowhere near where we want to be yet. And the reaction control system is a minor bit sprightly in this capsule, as it tends to be. But, you know, other than that, it's not too bad. Main thing we want to avoid here, and I'm going to take off, or am I going to take off SAS? You don't want to overheat the capsule. Losing that parachute would be a bad idea, but let's look at this guy here, this heat shield. We, you know, we're beginning to heat up, and right now it's absorbing the heat. But before too long, the temperature will be too great, and it simply will not be able to keep up with it, and it'll start vaporizing the heat shield. The ablator vaporizing is actually a good thing. You see, what happens here is that the air basically cannot get out of the way of the shock wave that's pushing it against the capsule. So it gets compressed and it heats up. But if we release SAS, then for some reason or another, and I'm not quite sure why, it decides not to go prograde. I think, or retrograde. I think part of it has to do with the fact that, oh, there we go. That is a dangerous thing, by the way. Do we actually get any ablation on that going? Nothing ablated. I guess I came in a little too shallow. So we'll just release that. We still probably do want to be careful about parachute deployment, but you can see, even at this rate, we're slowing down alright. But normally we would actually not slow down much at all. And so here Jeb is just going to fall back to the planet. This time hopefully not burning up. And he is getting a much nicer ride. It is probably about a 1G descent or so. Let me just see how much time I've been through. I do want to do the resources today, and I probably will do that. But, and I do want to show you a little bit of career mode as well. So we'll do resources, then career mode. But it's very important that, we try to get this thing landing as quickly as possible so we can do that. The way that the parachutes work are a lot different, I do have to say. The descent is a lot more graceful. Okay, let's take it off a time warp. I do not want to rip off the parachutes. And we're coming in about 5 or so meters per second. 5.5 meters per second. Well, you know what? That's landed as far as I'm concerned. I want to show you perhaps a different way. If maybe we want to do an unmanned capsule. And we want to get it off. I'm going to create really two things. I'm going to create a satellite here that will be responsible for scanning for resources. And so we have this nifty little guy here. We'll just get it centered on the top. And when we deploy it, you can see that it's got this nice little dish that comes out. But we have a number of things we have to worry about with that. Most notably the power drain. Now I could use the ion engines here. I don't really see the need to though. I'm just going to put 2 of these little engines on. Maybe some batteries as well. Let me hook up my mouse. Because you know what, it's possibly not such a bad idea for us to zoom in on the sky, make sure we do get this set up the way we want it. Batteries, of course, are never a bad idea. And then, on top of that, we will want solar panels, of course. Now, interesting thing I have heard about these solar panels is that we can, once you have these guys without the covers open, it's not possible to close them anymore. Now, I do not know how true that is. But, we'll just have to test it and see, I suppose. let's get ourselves a small decoupler here. And let's also maybe get a engine that we can possibly use for re-entry. Maybe something... You know, I'm gonna go with the little Oscar fuel tank. Although I do not know if that's going to be enough, to be honest. We'll just have to see based off of our deal here what, you know, ends up happening. In fact, I'm going to use 2 of these here. And that way we will be able to deliver rather a package from space. So we again have another one of these decouplers down here. In fact, I want to decouple this. But we'll go to our structural parts here and we'll build ourselves a little return pod. Now, you might think that with the heat, you know, a return pod might actually be a difficult thing to pull off. Fortunately, we have service bays, so if we go over here to our utility, you'll see we have this 1.25 meter service bay. And what I can do with it is I can go through and I can stick in all of the stuff that you would normally have in one of these. So let's say that for some reason I have a science package on here and I want to collect the science. I'll just grab me one of these shallow deals here. I don't know why this is invisible. We'll just stick it up on the top like that. I think part of this is that so you can see through it. But we'll want maybe something like that. And a heat shield for sure. Not one of these large ones, but a small one maybe. And then I am going to stick a small parachute as well. Some batteries and let's give ourselves some experiments. Maybe maybe the teeny tiny mystery goo. Now it is worth noting too, you'll notice that I do not have my engines together. It turns out, or at least it seems to turn out, that these guys do not tend to do that well with when you have the engine in the same stage as really anything else. Let's see, I wanted to put science on it. Here we go. Another interesting thing about this as well, as you may have noticed, the mystery goo is a lot smaller. So now we actually do have a proper vehicle. And it's nice and tucked away in there. We have a 2.3 ton thing here. And you know, maybe it would not be such a bad idea if we took these engines here and use them to fly around with. Anyway, we now have a pressing problem because of the fact that this is hardly what you would call aerodynamic, right? And we don't really want this whole, thing to suffer a lot of drag. So we have these procedural fairings here. And now I can place this guy. I can come out here and say, okay, this is about where I think the fairing should be going. And then I can close up over the end of it like that. And let's just come up over this. We can finally come down and close the fairing. Got a little bit of a point to it. Interesting thing though is once the fairing's on, you can work inside of it. This is something that procedural fairings lacked that, I happen to think is a really nifty idea. Now this thing still can wobble within the within this guy, so it might be good to put some struts down. It never really hurts, at least. Struts are the space tape. We'll just call this the resource scanner, and let's just test everything so that we have an idea of what will happen. So when we blow the fairings on this, we will end up in a very interesting situation, because each one of these guys here each one of these segments will blow off. And now we just happen to have the nice bits on the inside. So this guy goes first, then this guy. We'll just revert back. I'm going to use something that I am pretty sure can get up there. Well, I say pretty sure. You can't really be all that sure about anything these days. We're going to have ourselves a small rocket like this. And, we'll just use this guy here. And then let's find ourselves a decoupler. And we will, it might not be such a good or bad idea for us to go ahead and I'm going to move this stage down just a little bit because we may wish to pop the fairings. This little adapter piece finally does have a use in terms of aerodynamics. As it turns out. Let me just go to engines here. We have this guy, which I think will be more than enough to get us up. In fact, maybe a little bit too much. That is hard to say, really. I'm going to put on some space tape, just to be sure. Launch stability enhancer is probably called for at this point. And then I think we're good with maybe some of these guys here. If we can just get this about like that. So here's the deal. You'll notice we have our center of mass in front of our center of lift. We want this to happen with rockets too, so that we don't flip out. But let's send this guy up into space. And let's see maybe if we can get this guy going. Now, I'm going to go half throttle at first, unless it becomes apparent that we don't need to. But, you know, we got gimbaling on here that we may need to turn off. And we want to pitch down. I'll move this stage up here as well. And we need to go into a polar orbit as well. Okay. That is a little bit too fast. And as we learned, we cannot really worry too much about our inclination just quite yet. We want to get out of the thickest part of the atmosphere. Maybe let gravity do some of the work for us. Ideally, you want to have a thrust-to-weight ratio of about 2. Well, we're about out of the atmosphere. I am going to, try cutting on the engines here. This is not the most efficient burn I think I've ever done. I'm going to stage that. I'm going to use this guy to get into space because that was suboptimal. Now I'm going to go for, I don't know, maybe 150 or so for this. I think you need to be at least at 150. In fact, let's zoom in because I do not seem to have a very good... Oh yeah, I am way off. Periapsis is 152 versus that. It's a little bit more difficult to get this guy going the way you want it to. We have 145. Go maybe like that, and maybe even get closer to circular here. 156 versus 139. Well, one of the things that we will want to do, of course, I think this burn will... Oh no! I don't know if we'll have enough fuel for this, to be honest. Yeah, let's retry that. This time at a quarter thrust, because, you know, we want to be a little bit more, or 2/3 thrust rather. Oh no. Okay. We'll just have to wobble a bit, I think. This thing for 2 tons is definitely overkill. There's way more delta V than we are used to. Okay. Turns out 60 was too soon. I think we're about on track here, but we do... maybe need to get out of the atmosphere as soon as possible. I think we're good to throttle up just a little bit. So this is going to take just a little bit of time. We're at about half throttle now. We can probably begin making inclination adjustments. Being very careful in the way we do it, because you know, we do want to get over here to this guy over here. Okay, let's just activate this engine, because I do not trust this thing to get us into the right inclination, as it were. We are a shade high. I don't quite know what counts for polar under this circumstance, but let's maybe get this guy over here. Maybe a little bit of physical time warp will be a good thing for us to have. This is about the least efficient thing you can do, by the way. This is not a very good use of fuel at all. But, you know, we've got this guy going on here. We've got a bit of a periapsis. But we got more than a bit of a periapsis. We'll just kick this guy on back, I think. And we will add a maneuver here for us to do our thing. I do not know how inclined we are, or if this will be sufficient at all. But we don't have to necessarily be in a circular orbit here. We only need 67 meters per second at delta V, which is quite nice, actually. Something tells me that I have balance issues. So let's get down to brass tacks here. I guess I may do another video on this, just to finish everything up, because this is probably going to get very long if I'm not too careful. There we go. That's probably more than sufficient. So we'll pop out these guys here, so we have a little bit of electric charge. It's a shame that we are not really aligned with the Terminator. And then we'll turn this guy on, and we can perform an orbital survey, except I had forgotten one little bit here. Well, we'll deploy another one, I think, at some other point. Just to show what it is, because I totally forgot about the comms device. What we should do, however, is I think it would be good for us to take advantage of the facts that we have these engines here. And that is probably a little bit too shallow. I'm gonna go to 12K. Or not 12K, or not shallow, steep. I'm just going to do like this, and we will test the re-entry module. So we'll say goodbye to this guy. We could open the bay, and we will eventually. In fact, let's at least grab some science to show that we can. This thing is remarkably heat resistant. And I totally forgot about the fact that there are no reaction wheels on this. Maybe this thing will right itself. But I wouldn't count on it. This is usually about the worst situation you can have here, is for this thing to be pointing the wrong way. But I think we're going to be going prograde, or retrograde with this, and that'll be fine. You know, we'll just need to let this thing figure out exactly what it is that it's going to do. No SAS. We do not want this thing to struggle. I forgot that this thing had absolutely no reaction wheels in it whatsoever. That small probe, that is. So we are now aligning with the prograde vector. And you can see we're surviving quite easily here. Now we don't want to open this thing up, of course, because that could be actually rather bad if you think about it. We're coming down on the polar caps. I'll just use physical time warp here to get in as close as we can. I'm hoping that our ablator here, that we might have lost some. We've lost a little bit. We have, we've maybe made a little bit steeper of a re-entry than we would like. Although we did come down pretty quickly. And when we were below Mach 1, what I'm going to do is I am going to open the service bay. We can now deploy this parachute. It doesn't really matter which way we land on, I'm sure. But that's, you know, a recovery for us. So unfortunately, resources are probably something I can't spend much time on. But I do want to very quickly cover career mode. Okay, go away. Let's see, if we go here, I want to point out that the new career mode is actually quite a you know, bigger ordeal. So I'm going to call this Demo Career 1.0. We'll go to our difficulty options again. And there are some things here. I'm just going to take all of the science and all of the starting reputation and things like that. Not all of the re-entry heating, but we'll do that. Because while this is probably not the way that you would normally play the game, I mean, we do have, you know, thousands of science, sure. We should see what we have first before we do anything. So we now have this miniature flea solid rocket booster, and we now happen to have 2 nodes here, which we can decide to do whatever we want to. You'll notice, by the way, all these other nodes are grayed out so that we can see what we're doing here. So, you know, we got things like miniaturization, which hopefully leads to nice things like smaller engines. I am not too sure about that. But, you know, we'll go in. We have about 500,000. You'll see that we actually have these altitude records here. Let's say I'm going to launch our first vessel. We'll get 1 science point from that and some money, and gather scientific data from Kerbin as well. Well, let's just presume that we're in this situation to where there is, okay, go away. You know, we want to make as much of this as we can. So, there's a few ways to go about it, of course. We have our pick, really, and we have science to work with, so I'm going to take this guy here. Now that we don't have to be grinding for these contracts here. The name of the game is more or less collecting, it would seem to be collecting as much science early on in the game. So we have a crew report. We'll keep that. Hopefully we will not, you know, we'll not run into too many issues here. I'll get an EVA report as well. Oh, B to board. That is a new thing. That's going to take some getting used to. We have a mystery goo unit. And then we have a staging error. Unfortunately, you do not lose your parachutes like this. Grab ourselves a crew report, and I think we may have just enough time to observe the mystery goo. Let's recover this. This is not such a good thing. But, you know, if you want to see what maybe the next tier is like, and maybe I shouldn't have taken all the science in doing this. You know, we have 5 science here, 5 science here to unlock more science. And everything is really just completely rearranged, so I think the heat shield will become important at one point. You take your pick, you know. I do want to actually go through and show real quick before I show off the VAB, or not the VAB, but the astronaut complex. You know, the nature of these world records. Don't save. Yeah, we'll save and continue. We'll be back for that, because we do want to pick up another contract. I'm not going to turn this into a career mode game this late, but you know, we may want to escape the atmosphere. And so if you've done something like I've done that's really quite fantastically stupid, there's really no way that we're going to land with this thing intact, I don't think. We'll just find a separator. We can get almost all of our money back from this, I would think, because what do we have? We have the altitude record. We'll watch this thing tick up. Now let's make sure that we do not have any staging errors this time. We look to be good, so... Oh, that's another thing I totally forgot to mention. Oh, we need to see how this is coming up. We are very slowly making these speed records happen. And we'll probably set an altitude record. Hopefully... I will not... I hear burning. You know, we're getting a lot of money for this. So yeah, once you finish one of these guys, you finish the entire shebang. And it just keeps on going and going and going. And so we've more than paid for our launch stack at this point. I think that this is an investment that is well worth it. In fact, how high up are we going to go? We are going to go to 102 kilometers. Now there are other things like, you know, moving away from overheating. That is really interesting. You even get a world record for going into space. And they just keep on piling on. These are very nice contracts to have. I have no idea what just... Oh, mystery goo container exploded. That's another thing about these guys, too. The heat. If we just bring up the cheat menu real quick. Not to cheat, of course. We can actually see the thermal debug colors. My pod is pretty hot. That is, maybe not the best way for us to re-enter. If we want to see, you know, the debug data here, and we can see about how hot it is. It's cooling down a little bit. But wow, we almost killed our Kerbal. I'm just going to get rid of that. Maybe that'll help. I think, however, the likelihood of us killing our Kerbal is probably pretty high. So we've got a distance record as well. Once we get into the atmosphere, things will cool off a little bit. Because there's convection, conduction, and radiation to get rid of your heat. And you can only really convect in an atmosphere, so... You know, that's one thing to be worried about there. And temperature is still going down. We should slow down momentarily. But I'm going to attempt a fairly aggressive re-entry here, because we are heating up just a little bit. Those service bays, incidentally, would be a good place for that goo. Oh no, Jeb is overheating. Might be time for me to deploy the parachutes. We definitely do not want to touch the skin of the aircraft at this point. That could be kinda bad. So we'll get Jeb down here and recover him. You can see our heat is going down quite a bit now because of our convection here. So you can take advantage of that on any planet that has an atmosphere. And when Jeb comes back down, we will recover him. And there we go. Now let's assume that Jeb didn't survive. That's kind of likely with the new re-entry heating if we're not careful. What can we do about that? Well, we can of course buy astronauts, but you'll notice now we have new hires, and they cost money. The thing about that is that that could be kind of bad for us. Let's say I want another pilot. Scientist actually wouldn't be bad in this case, I wouldn't think, because we have two pilots. I wonder, does this cost less when you upgrade the facility? I do not think so. But we'll see. So, this means that rescuing Kerbals from orbit becomes a much more tantalizing idea. Or at least so it would seem. Anyway, I'll probably start a new career mode series at some point, and might do something with resources because we simply had not done anything with it. I mean, we got the satellite into space, and I was not able to show it off, but I think that warrants its own deal. Until then, this has been Thy Lord Root, and I will see you later.